It is Monday, March 2nd, 2026. And if you are listening to this right now, you are waking up to a world that looks fundamentally different than the one we left behind on Friday afternoon.
Fundamentally different is, I mean, that's putting it mildly. The geopolitical map has essentially been rewritten in the last 72 hours. We've crossed a threshold that military analysts have been warning about for, what, 20 years?
Yeah, at least 20 years.
Right. And honestly, looking at the data coming in this morning from these geopolitical analyst interviews, I don't think anyone was truly ready for what this actually looks like.
No, absolutely not. We are looking at a situation where the news cycle is moving so fast it's almost impossible to track. But that is exactly why we are here today. We're going to slow it down.
Yeah, we have to.
We've got a massive stack of reports to get through today. Military assessments, economic data from the Asian markets that just closed, satellite analysis, and leaks from the Pentagon regarding what the U.S. and Israel are calling Operation Midnight Hammer.
Or Operation Epicuri, depending on which press release you happen to be reading. But the branding, it really doesn't matter.
Right.
What matters is the reality on the ground. And the mission for this deep dive is to cut through that fog of war. Because there is a lot of fog right now. We need to understand not just the strikes themselves, but the immediate cascading fallout that is currently engulfing the entire Middle East. We're talking from the Persian Gulf all the way to the Mediterranean.
And the big question we need to answer today, the core of this whole deep dive, is this. The U.S. declared regime change. They declared a decisive victory on Saturday. So why, 72 hours later, are missiles still flying, oil prices spiking through the roof, and U.S. bases taking direct fire?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question, because according to the plan, this was supposed to be over by now.
So let's start at the beginning, or rather, the inciting incident that kicked this entire thing off. Late last week, heading into the weekend, the U.S. and Israel launched a massive joint operation. And the headline event, the thing that basically stopped the world in its tracks, was the target.
It was a decapitation strike. There was really no other way to put it. At exactly 8:30 a.m. on Saturday morning, a joint U.S.-Israeli air operation targeted the residence and the office of Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
And this wasn't a near miss. We've seen those before, right? Where they hit a bunker he was in an hour ago?
No, this was direct. We have absolute confirmation now from multiple sources. The Supreme Leader is dead. The strike involved approximately 30 munitions targeting his compound. And what's critical to understand here, and this is something a lot of the mainstream coverage is entirely missing, is the context of the target location.
Right, because he wasn't in a deep underground bunker. He wasn't hiding in some mountain fortress.
Exactly. He was at his residence. Reportedly, he was fasting. You have to remember, it is Ramadan right now. He was working at his desk. And the strike didn't just kill him.
It killed his family.
It killed family members, his daughter, his son-in-law, grandchildren, and perhaps just as significantly from a strict military standpoint, it took out about 40 senior officials and commanders who were gathered there for a high-level meeting.
Which really brings up the first major point of analysis for us today. How does that happen? How do you get the Supreme Leader, his family, and 40 top brass in one room, above ground, when regional tensions are already this high?
It suggests a catastrophic intelligence breach on the Iranian side, or, arguably, a fatalistic calculation. Some analysts are suggesting he knew it was coming and simply chose to stay. You can compare it to the assassination of Hezbollah leadership previously, but the result is exactly the same. The U.S. and Israel took the shot. They removed the head of the snake, to use the rhetoric we're hearing out of Washington and Tel Aviv.
And the victory lap was immediate. I mean, we saw President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu pretty much immediately on camera declaring that the regime was effectively dead.
Yes. President Trump's message to the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, was completely explicit. He essentially said, surrender now and you get immunity, or face death.
Yeah.
The narrative being pushed aggressively was that with Khamenei gone, the spine of the Islamic Republic would snap.
That the Iranian people would rise up.
Right. That the people would rise up, the military would crumble, and we'd see a swift transition to a new, likely pro-Western order.
And we saw the defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, on TV calling it a preemptive measure. He stated that Iran was building a conventional shield for nuclear blackmail, and this strike was absolutely necessary to secure the region once and for all.
That was the sell to the public, a surgical removal of the leadership to prevent a nuclear Iran. But here is where we have to pivot from those mission-accomplished speeches to the harsh reality on the ground. Because what we are seeing today, as of Monday morning, is not a regime collapse.
It's the exact opposite.
It is a massive rally around the flag effect. And we need to talk about why that is happening. Because it's not just about the Supreme Leader being killed. It is about something that happened almost simultaneously, which has completely changed the emotional calculus of the Iranian populace.
You're talking about the Minab massacre.
Yes. In the opening hours of this campaign, there was a strike on an elementary school in Minab.
A girls' school.
A girls' elementary school. We are looking at reports of somewhere between 85 and 105 dead, children and teachers. Now, whether this was an intelligence failure, a tragic targeting error, or collateral damage from a nearby strike, the optical result is exactly the same. Images of that school are being broadcast 24/7 across the entire Muslim world.
And that completely erases the internal division, doesn't it? I mean, even if you didn't like the hardline government, even if you were protesting for reform just a month ago.
Exactly. When foreign missiles kill 100 schoolgirls during Ramadan, politics simply goes out the window. It becomes existential. It becomes a visceral defense of the nation. So instead of an uprising against the regime like the U.S. predicted, you have millions of people in the streets mourning.
Right.
And because Khamenei was killed at his home while fasting and not hiding in a bunker, the narrative isn't, we got the dictator.
Yeah.
The narrative resonating in the region is, they martyred a pious leader and slaughtered our children.
That is a recipe for absolute unbridled rage.
It galvanizes the entire Shiite world globally. We are seeing protests erupt from Kashmir to Bahrain. The U.S. anticipated a political collapse. What they got was a holy war narrative. And practically speaking, the Iranian state actually functioned.
Yeah, a temporary council took charge almost immediately.
Right. The president, the head of the judiciary, they stepped up. A new defense minister was appointed within hours of the strike. The state did not blink.
So the head was cut off, but the body kept moving. And not just moving, but fighting back. Let's transition to the military response, because the expectation in Washington was chaos. The expectation was that without the Supreme Leader, command and control would just shatter.
And that was a fundamental misunderstanding of how Iran's military doctrine actually works. They use what is called a mosaic defense.
Okay, let's unpack this for everyone listening. What exactly is a mosaic defense?
So Western militaries are typically very top-down. The general tells the colonel, who tells the captain, who tells the lieutenant. If you cut off the head, the body literally does not know what to do. The Iranian system, specifically the IRGC, is designed for exactly this decapitation scenario. It is highly decentralized. They have broken the country and their regional assets into independent tiles of a mosaic.
Meaning each regional commander has the authority to launch on their own?
Precisely. It is designed to survive a decapitation strike.
Yeah.
If they lose contact with Tehran or if the leadership is wiped out, they have pre-authorized standing orders. They don't need to call home to ask permission to fire. And we saw this play out in real time. The assassination happened at 8:30 a.m. Contrary to the chaos the U.S. expected, Iran fired back within 45 minutes to an hour.
Which is incredibly fast.
It's instant in modern warfare terms. It means the launch crews were already drilled for this exact scenario. The decapitation didn't stop the limbs from fighting. And this brings us to what might be the most shocking strategic development of the last 48 hours. Iran isn't just shooting at U.S. ships in the water. They have shifted their strategy completely. They are targeting the hosts.
The vassal dilemma?
That's the term being used by a lot of the geopolitical analysts we're tracking today. The message Iran is sending is brutally simple. You host them, you burn. They are actively targeting the sovereign countries that house U.S. bases.
Let's go through this list because the damage reports coming in are just staggering. Let's start with Bahrain.
Bahrain is the headquarters of the U.S. Fifth Fleet. It is the absolute nerve center for U.S. naval power in the region. Reports indicate significant damage to the port facilities, but also, and this is a massive escalation strikes on naval officer housing.
That is a direct, intentional attack on personnel.
It's a message that there is no safe zone. None. Then you move to Kuwait. This is where the story gets very murky and very dangerous. We have reports of 3 U.S. F-15 fighter jets going down.
Now, the U.S. Central Command came out and claimed this was friendly fire from Kuwaiti air defense.
Which is a narrative that is almost as damaging as admitting they were shot down by the enemy. Think about the strategic implications of that. If Kuwaiti air defense panicked and shot down 3 American jets that were taking off to protect them, that is a humiliation. It applies total chaos and a breakdown in the alliance.
And the Iranian claim regarding those F-15s?
They claim they shot them down directly,
Well,
or that their electronic warfare caused the crash. There is video circulating of a pilot parachuting down. But honestly, whether it was friendly fire or Iranian action, the result is 3 U.S. strike fighters destroyed in the opening moves of the conflict. That is not supposed to happen.
Then there is Qatar, Al Udeid Air Base. This is the big one.
It's the largest U.S. base in the region. The report today is that a massive early warning radar system, a billion-dollar piece of kit, was utterly destroyed.
$1 billion. Just gone.
Gone in the flash. And functionally, that blinds U.S. operations in that entire sector. If you lose your eyes, you cannot coordinate defense against the incoming missile swarms. Qatar has panicked. They have halted all LNG exports. We will get to the economic fallout of that in just a minute. But militarily, Al Udeid is taking heavy, sustained fire.
And the UAE? I saw the footage on social media of missiles flying over Dubai.
This is the death of the Dubai model. The aura of security is completely shattered. Missiles flying right over the Burj Khalifa. But specifically, there was a strike near the Palm Jumeirah. The Iranians claim they targeted a covert intelligence facility, a suspected Mossad outpost that was disguised near a luxury hotel.
And Saudi Arabia is taking hits, too.
Sultan Air Base was hit. And we have reports of strikes on Aramco facilities, specifically a major refinery. This is the Scorched Earth campaign. Iran is essentially saying, we will dismantle the economic and military infrastructure of the entire Gulf if you let the U.S. operate from your soil.
And what about the defense network? We have spent billions on Patriots, on THAAD, on the Iron Dome. Why are these munitions getting through?
It is a math problem, and it's a problem the U.S. military establishment has ignored for far too long. We are burning through interceptors at a completely unsustainable rate. Think about it. A Patriot missile costs millions of dollars.
Okay.
An Iranian Shahed drone costs maybe $20,000.
So it's just sheer saturation.
Exactly. Iran is using cheap drones and older missiles to deliberately drain the magazines of U.S. air defense. They are firing the cheap stuff to force the U.S. and Israel to fire their extremely expensive limited supply interceptors. And once those magazines are empty,
Then big stuff comes through.
then the advanced hypersonics hit. And we are seeing that exact scenario play out in Israel right now. Tel Aviv and Haifa are taking heavy damage. The Iron Dome and David Sling are being totally overwhelmed. Reports say Israel has absorbed over 700 missiles in just 24 hours. The shield is cracking.
It sounds like the U.S. administration expected a sprint, and they got dragged into a brutal marathon that they simply weren't packed for.
That is the perfect analogy. And while the military situation is dire, the economic situation is arguably catastrophic.
Let's move to that. Segment 3 of our deep dive today, the economic tsunami. Because if you're listening to this in Europe or Asia or even the U.S., this is where it hits your daily life.
It hits your wallet, it hits your supply chains, it hits everything. The Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed.
Closed how, exactly? Is it physically blocked with sunken ships?
No, the IRGC simply issued verbal orders closing it, and commercial shipping has stopped cold. Not because of a physical wall of ships, but because insurance rates spiked to 10% of the hull value overnight. No shipping company can afford to sail through there.
And what does that mean for the global market?
It means 20 to 25% of the world's daily oil supply is frozen. It is simply off the market.
We saw oil jump from roughly $72 a barrel to over $80 almost instantly.
That is just the opening tremor. The algorithms, the trading bots that run the global markets are predicting a hockey stick rise. If this blockade holds for another week, we aren't talking about $80 oil. We are talking about $150, maybe $200 plus.
$200 oil, that crashes the global economy.
It causes a global depression, period. And it is not just oil. Look at the natural gas situation. Europe is facing a nightmare scenario. They spent the last few years totally cutting off Russian gas. Who did they replace it with?
Qatar.
Qatar. And now Qatar has halted LNG exports because their facilities are under attack, and the strait is completely unsafe. Gas prices in Europe surged 50% in a matter of hours. Europe is looking at a total energy blackout if this continues into the winter. Asia is affected too. China is somewhat insulated because of strategic reserves and land routes, but Japan and India are incredibly vulnerable to this Hormuz closure.
And going back to the Dubai model you mentioned earlier, we are seeing unprecedented reports of Western expats fleeing.
It's an exodus. People are renting cars and driving across the desert to Oman to try and catch flights because the airports in Dubai and Doha are severely disrupted or completely closed. You have to understand, the economies of the Gulf states, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, are built entirely on brand. They are built on being safe havens for capital, tourism, and expatriate workers.
The whole pitch is come to Dubai, it's safe, it's modern, it's an oasis.
Exactly. But you can rebuild a glass tower. You cannot easily rebuild a reputation for safety once ballistic missiles start flying over the luxury hotels. The capital flight we are seeing right now is historic. The brand of the UAE and Saudi Arabia as stable hubs is shattered.
And this brings us to the domestic political risk in the U.S. The stock market is dropping. The Dow is taking a hit. Inflationary pressure is imminent if gas prices double at the pump.
The current administration faces a monumental crisis. Politically, they cannot survive $8 gas. And Iran knows this perfectly well. This is a core part of their strategy. They are targeting the American voters' wallet to force Washington to halt the campaign.
But instead of stopping, it seems like the war is just getting wider. Let's look at the escalation ladder. We're seeing escalation on fronts that I don't think most people were paying attention to on Friday.
It is the ring of fire strategy activating all at once. Hezbollah has entered the chat.
For a while, there was this prevailing idea in Western analysis that Hezbollah might sit this out, or that they were too degraded from previous conflicts to be a real threat.
That was entirely wishful thinking. After the Israeli strikes on Lebanon in the opening hours of this conflict, Hezbollah committed fully. There was initial hesitation, but now they are firing precision missiles directly at Haifa and northern Israel.
Right.
And that degradation myth is being exposed. Despite previous wars, Hezbollah retains tens of thousands of rockets, and they are now opening a massive second front, heavily stretching Israeli defenses.
And it's not just the Middle East. We need to talk about Europe's entanglement. We mentioned Cyprus earlier.
This is a massive development that is somewhat flying under the radar in the mainstream press. The U.S. moved aircraft to Cyprus and Greece after the regional bases in the Gulf became unsafe.
They basically ran out of safe parking spots for their jets.
Essentially, yes. But by moving offensive military assets to Cyprus, the U.S. dragged Cyprus directly into the war. Iran struck British and U.S. assets on Cyprus.
Cyprus is an EU member state.
Exactly. This marks the explicit expansion of the war into EU territory. This is Iran firing a very clear warning shot at France, Germany, and the UK. The message is, stay out, or you are targets too.
And looming over all of this are the superpowers. Russia and China. We aren't seeing Chinese troops on the ground, but their fingerprints are all over this response.
It comes down to intelligence support. There are strong indications from analysts that Russia and China provided early warning of the U.S. attack, and that they are currently providing highly accurate satellite data for Iranian targeting.
That explains the precision of the counterstrikes.
It explains exactly how they are hitting specific buildings in naval bases.
Yeah.
And politically, look at the geopolitical pivot happening in real time. Look at who the Gulf states are calling. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are not calling Washington for help right now. They are calling Moscow.
Because they realize the U.S. can't protect them.
Because they realize the U.S. is the actual cause of the danger. The U.S. presence is what is drawing the fire. And if the U.S. cannot stop the missiles, the American security guarantee is entirely worthless. We are watching the end of American hegemony in the Middle East unfold.
So where does this go? This brings us to segment 5, the endgame scenarios. Because the U.S. administration seems to have deeply miscalculated the timeline and the nature of this conflict.
They absolutely did. They expected a 2-week shock and awe campaign followed by an unconditional surrender. What they have instead is a grueling war of attrition. And the U.S. Navy is simply not built for this kind of attrition in a confined space like the Persian Gulf.
I read reports just before we started recording that the aircraft carriers are being forced to pull back.
They have to. An aircraft carrier is a massive floating target. If you cannot reliably stop the drone swarms and the hypersonics, you have to move out of range. They are pulling back to the Indian Ocean, which is 1,000 kilometers away.
Which means their planes have to fly further, carry less ordnance, and refuel more often.
It severely limits the sortie rates. It slows down U.S. operations to a crawl. Meanwhile, the U.S. ships that are still trapped inside the Gulf are running out of ammo. Resupply is nearly impossible with the local ports burning. It is a total logistical nightmare.
And then there's the ultimate wild card in all of this, the nuclear question.
This is the supreme irony of this entire tragedy. Ayatollah Khamenei, the man the U.S. just assassinated, had a religious fatwa against nuclear weapons.
He explicitly said it was un-Islamic to build a bomb?
Correct. He was the barrier. But now he is dead. And the hardliners who are taking over, the military commanders who are watching their country be attacked, they are looking at Ukraine. They are looking at Libya. And they are saying to themselves, the only reason they attacked us is because we didn't have the bomb.
So the sprint to the bomb begins.
It is a high probability. With Khamenei gone and facing an existential threat from the U.S. and Israel, the new leadership, or the IRGC, may decide that a nuclear deterrent is the only survival guarantee they have left. The U.S. claimed this strike was to prevent a nuclear Iran. But by killing the one man who forbade the bomb, the U.S. may have actually guaranteed that Iran builds one.
That is a deeply terrifying thought. And politically, back home in the U.S., what happens next?
It's a disaster. There is real potential for impeachment if Congress decides the war was illegal, since there was no congressional approval for Operation Midnight Hammer. Plus, you have the glaring contradiction of an administration that campaigned on peace, starting a major regional war.
And for Israel.
They are facing severe economic ruin and physical destruction in major cities like Haifa and Tel Aviv if this war drags on into a prolonged conflict.
So we are 72 hours in. What was supposed to be a surgical decapitation strike has morphed into a massive bleeding wound across the entire region. We are witnessing a scorched earth campaign.
Absolutely. The illusion of American deterrence has been challenged and arguably broken. Bases are burning, jets are down, and the global energy supply is currently being held hostage.
It really makes you wonder about the definition of victory here.
There is no victory in this scenario, only escalation.
I want to leave you, our listeners, with a final thought today. Something to really mull over as you watch the news unfold over the next few weeks. The U.S. killed the one man who religiously forbade the nuclear bomb. By trying to aggressively remove the threat, have we actually removed the only barrier preventing a nuclear-armed Iran? And as the oil stops flowing and the missiles keep flying, at what point does a victory speech turn into a desperate plea for a ceasefire that the other side is no longer interested in granting?
That is the question that will define the rest of this decade.
Stay tuned. The situation is incredibly fluid, and we will be here to help you make sense of it all. Stay curious and keep your eyes on the horizon.
Goodbye for now.
See you on the next Deep Dive.
Today we're diving into a crisis in the Middle East that has just erupted with staggering speed, sending shockwaves across the entire globe. We're going to break down how we got here and what it all means for us.
In just a matter of hours, a region that was already on a knife's edge went from a tense but basically stable standoff to a full-blown regional war. I mean, we're not talking about a slow burn here. This was a flat-out explosion. So, how on earth did we get here? To really get a handle on it, we've got to look at the absolutely lightning-fast escalation that just shattered decades of fragile stability. The sheer speed of these events, that's the key to understanding the chaos we're in now. And this is where things get, well, just wild. Look at this timeline. On February 28th, it looked like we were on the verge of a historic peace deal. There were reports of major concessions on the table. Less than 24 hours later, all of that hope was just violently erased, and the whole region was plunged into chaos. The spark that lit this whole fire was a military operation on a scale we've really never seen before. This wasn't designed to just send a message. Oh no. This was designed to try and dismantle an entire state from the top down.
And this is the term you really need to know: decapitation strike. See, unlike previous strikes that maybe targeted military assets, the goal here was completely different. The strategy was to eliminate Iran's entire senior leadership in one single blow. The idea was to create a power vacuum and just hope the state would collapse on its own.
And when you look at the target list, I mean, the sheer audacity of this plan is breathtaking. We're talking about the very, very top of Iran's political and military structure. There were reports of a high-level leadership meeting in Tehran, and even that the Supreme Leader himself was a target. This was an all-or-nothing gamble.
So the response from Iran, it wasn't some single calculated counterattack. Instead, what we saw was an immediate and massive cascade of retaliation that just erupted across the entire region, seemingly all at once.
The images coming out of the UAE are just shocking. Major economic and tourist hubs, places like Dubai, were hit hard, with skyscrapers engulfed in flames. You have to understand, their entire reputation was built on being the safe haven for global business. Well, that perception, it just went up in smoke.
At the exact same time, American military bases from Bahrain to Iraq were hammered by waves of drones and missiles. We're hearing reports that their defenses were completely overwhelmed with significant damage. Central Command has now confirmed the first American casualties, which is a stark, tragic reminder of the human cost here.
Of course, Israel was quickly facing salvos of rockets lighting up the skies. And then, Iran's allies like Hezbollah officially entered the conflict. That opens up a whole new and incredibly dangerous front to the north, stretching Israeli defenses to the absolute breaking point. And just in case you thought this couldn't spread any further, it has. The conflict is expanded towards Europe. We're getting reports of drone strikes on strategic military bases in Cyprus, dragging the continent right into the heart of all this.
So what we're really witnessing here is the fundamental business model of the Gulf monarchies becoming obsolete, literally overnight. Their core promise to the world was security. With international flights grounded and reports of a mass exodus of foreign workers, that promise has been shattered.
These military shockwaves immediately triggered a global economic meltdown. And I want to be clear, this isn't just a regional problem. This is a crisis that is being felt in every single market all across the planet.
So let's look at the numbers. 40%. That is how much European gas prices surged, almost instantly. That means higher energy bills for homes, for businesses. It puts an immense, immediate pressure on all of Europe's economies.
How about this one? $200. That's the projected price per barrel of oil if this crisis continues. A level like that wouldn't just cause some pain at the pump, it would almost certainly trigger a deep and damaging global recession, impacting jobs and livelihoods absolutely everywhere.
And then there's this, 20%. That's the amount of the entire world's supply of liquefied natural gas that was just halted when Qatar suspended its production. That is a massive hole in the world's energy supply, and the ripple effects from that, well, they'll be felt for months, if not years.
So here's the crucial point. This conflict isn't just being fought with missiles, it's being fought with energy as an economic weapon. By closing the Strait of Hormuz, Iran is essentially squeezing the jugular vein of the global economy. And this also highlights a huge vulnerability for the West, what some are calling the magazine depth problem. They're using multi-million-dollar interceptors to shoot down drones that cost a tiny fraction of that to produce. It's an economic war of attrition that they just may not be able to sustain.
But, beyond the battlefield and the crashing markets, this crisis signals something far, far bigger, a fundamental and likely irreversible shift in the global balance of power.
Just think about it. The decision to strike at the exact moment a diplomatic deal was on the table has shattered American credibility. The effectiveness of the retaliation has broken the perception of U.S. military invincibility. And all of this has pushed powers like Russia and China even closer to Iran, solidifying an opposing bloc. The unipolar moment, that period where the U.S. was the world's sole superpower, may have just definitively ended.
And this brings us to the ultimate takeaway from the last 48 hours of pure chaos. We are rapidly entering a multipolar world where power is more spread out. But the question we're all left with is, does that make the world more stable or just dangerously unpredictable? The old rules no longer seem to apply, and what comes next is anyone's guess.